I'm Nellie Wilson, and I am a citizen scientist volunteer with the Hilltown Land Trust, and I've been working since 2019 in collecting data every spring for vernal pools to submit to Natural Heritage of Massachusetts to be able to get them certified for protection. And that protection includes a 100-foot radius around the pool. And it's really important to have these fragile ecosystems protected. Let's go check it out. And you want to make sure that you're taking notes about the space around you and how to get to the pool. It should also be said that you want to make sure if the pool is on property that is owned by someone, you have to get permission from that person before you go and get their pool certified. We want to make sure that people have the understanding of how important these ecosystems are. There are also vernal pools that are on public land. I got into doing all of this because Meredith with Wild and Scenic Westfield back in 2019 was offering up a training program called the Vernal Pool Plunge. And I was like, that sounds interesting. I didn't know anything about vernal pools before I took that class, and it was really kind of life-changing. We had training of like getting all the data, but then we got to go out in the field, and one of the spots we came to was actually this pool right here, and I got to see my first fairy shrimp, which I'll show you in a little bit. And it was just amazing to get to see these creatures that are dependent upon these pools. And like, it really sunk in that I could do something about this and helping to protect these areas. If I'm at a pool where I can collect data without even going in the water, that's what I'll do. Sometimes sometimes to get an accurate count of things, there's stuff way off in the middle. So sometimes I do go into the pool, but the preference really is to just stay around the edge and get to observe. The first thing that I like to do when I'm at a pool is walk the perimeter. And you want to get an estimate of how long and how wide it is, as well as how deep it is. That information is all data that needs to be collected. Go slow and look around. See who, if anybody, is in here. As I'm coming around this corner here, I'm seeing that we actually have some egg masses right here. So we always want to be looking down when we're wandering around a pool. Pools are fed by snowmelt and rainwater. And so depending on how much snowmelt there was, depending on how much rain we've gotten or not, it will, the water level in the pool will go up and down accordingly. And the, kind of definition of a vernal pool is that it doesn't have any inlet or outlet. So there's no water that flows through the pool. There's no fish, which makes it a lot safer to be able to lay your egg masses in there and know that at least fish aren't gonna eat your babies. The last time I was here, this whole area that now just looks maybe a little muddy, that was all wet a couple weeks ago, like about 3 weeks ago. So you can really get a sense of how the water level changes.
Are you just measuring where you actually see the water today? Or are you measuring where you can see where it's dried out from where it was?
If this was my first visit to the pool, I would probably want to collect a bunch of data, measure out the 2 areas that I see that still have water on them, take note of the areas where it looks like there was water, and then actually hold off and come back next year or try coming back after there's been like a really big rainstorm. So at this point, with what I've seen, just right in this spot, this data alone would qualify for this to be certifiable as a vernal pool. Fairy shrimp, in particular, if you have those in a pool, you are set. It is a vernal pool. With the spotted salamander egg masses, if you've got 5 or more of them, then that's certifiable. The same thing with wood frog egg masses. If you've got 5 or more of them, or a combination of those with spotted salamander egg masses or other mole salamander egg masses, you're good to go. But for myself, I love collecting as much data as possible on vernal pools. So let's keep exploring the pool. You want to make sure that you're coming up underneath it very gently. You want to try not to dislodge it from the grass or the stick that it's attached to. And the only reason why I use a net to kind of bring these egg masses higher up in the water is so that I can get a good picture of them to best document, so that when I submit the data for certification, that the person looking at the photos can clearly see that this is indeed a spotted salamander egg mass. A spotted salamander egg mass, you'll kind of see it has this gelatinous mass around the outside, and then within it, it has these individual clumps. They almost look like little black worms inside right now. Those are the developing embryos. Here's another one that like you can kind of get a better sense of the outside jelly that surrounds the egg masses. And then you can see that there's almost like a little bit of green inside of the eggs. That is a symbiotic algae that exists inside of each of the eggs, and it's something that as the larvae hatch their way out, that'll be their first food. Isn't that so cool? Right in here, we have fairy shrimp, which are the little orange guys that are swimming around. We have a wood frog tadpole, and it looks like we've got mosquito larvae. And so again, we haven't gotten very far, and we're already seeing a ton of life in here. Wood frogs will mate and lay their eggs all together in one section of a pool. And so you end up with like, you know, hundreds and hundreds, if not maybe like 1,000 individual eggs that are all in these blobs all together. Right here, we actually have kind of a good example to be able to compare at least the remnants of a wood frog egg mass compared to a spotted salamander egg mass. You can see we've got the wood frog remnants of those egg mass, and then this is the spotted salamander egg mass right there. So you can see the difference between the loose kind of individual eggs and with the spotted salamander, it's in a jelly holding all the eggs together. So let's just run down what is needed for certification again. So we need to make sure that we have photo documentation of the whole area of the pool. We need to have measurements of its width, its length, estimates are fine, and its depth. You can usually kind of estimate, or like if you have a long stick, you can kind of like reach out and stick that in kind of what you see as the deepest part. Usually vernal pools range between 1, maybe 4 feet deep. So for wood frog tadpoles, you can often get different kinds of frogs that lay their eggs in vernal pools. So being able to correctly identify a wood frog tadpole it's best to be able to get them in a container that's clear like this, and then you can look at their belly. Their belly has sparkles on it. It's kind of a silvery, sparkly belly is the best way to be able to identify a wood frog tadpole. So we just wanted to give you a good look at a fairy shrimp and also a wood frog tadpole. Fairy shrimp lie on their backs to swim, and they wiggle their little legs around, like you can see. The females, at a certain point, you might see that they would actually have a little blob of eggs on the lower part of their abdomen. Their eggs can be blown to a different pool, so that's one of the ways that their eggs can be dispersed. And so with fairy shrimp, they will lay their eggs at the bottom of the pool, and their eggs can dry out and sit there in the leaf litter, and then they hatch out the following spring. And if for some reason we were in a horrific drought, those eggs can actually hang out there for a couple of years and be able to hatch out when the rain shows up again. They're really cool. Here we are at another pool. So why don't we take a look? That's right here, but it's all kind of covered in silt. So let's just see if I can gently. So this is a spotted salamander egg mass. You can see this pool has a lot of tannins in it and very brown and kind of mudded up. It can kind of coat the egg mass. This pool is just kind of along a trail. This is on state forest land here in Massachusetts. It's a kind of a problematic location for a vernal pool, is that unfortunately this is in the midst of a snowmobile path, and locals do tend to take their ATVs down here. And so you have vehicles running through the water here, which can disrupt the egg masses, can pollute the water. At this point, it's not certifiable, but it's clear that it is being utilized like a vernal pool to have wood frogs and spotted salamanders laying their eggs in here. It's just that because of the disruption, their survival rate is going to be a lot lower than in pools that are undisturbed. This pool here is one that has been certified. And I actually had a landowner that had reached out to me. They weren't sure if they maybe had a vernal pool on their property, but they also walk this whole area with their dog frequently. And so they knew about these pools out here in the woods. So I met up with her early in the spring. I think it must have been, April. By March, I start getting excited that it's like, oh, we're getting close to vernal pool season. And so we took a walk, must have been sometime kind of early mid-April. But this particular depression, it's a little hard to tell because the leaves are very suspended in the water, but it's actually a fairly deep pool. It goes down probably about 2 feet at its deepest. Even in a small pool like this, you will get a whole bunch of wood frogs that will come and lay their eggs, and they'll lay them together in a big mass. See that these are very recently hatched little wood frog tadpoles. So this is another way that you can collect data for certifying vernal pools, is even if the tadpoles have hatched out, especially at this stage, being able to get pictures of them when they're still so tiny and are still on the egg masses that they just hatched out of is great. Pools come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. This pool is maybe at the most like 8 feet across, right? And it can still hold, I'm seeing like at least 10 spotted salamander egg masses. It's really incredible, like how much life can exist in such a small space. And we don't really think about that. And so it's been something that like I have really delighted in getting to just kind of have this more micro view of life that exists all around us, right? And we don't often pay attention to the little things, but there's so many of them. So this pool and other pools in the area, they have wood frogs, spotted salamanders, maybe other mole salamanders coming from as far away as half a mile. And in the early spring is when they'll wake up and they all start migrating to these pools to find a mate, to breed, and to lay their eggs. Wood frogs don't live very long. You know, they maybe get to live a couple of years, so they'll come back a couple of years, and then their tadpoles will grow up and disperse back within a like half-mile radius in the woods, and they'll come back to often the same pool that they were born in. And with spotted salamanders, they can actually live up to 20 years. It's incredible that you have these creatures that year after year, they will come back to these natal vernal pools to keep laying their eggs, and you have generations of wood frogs and salamanders all around the woods in here. With certifying pools, you need to specify what kind of habitat the pool is in. Upland, deciduous forest, that information is important to capture as well. This is a pool that I did get certified, and some years, like this year, I'm seeing that there's not very much happening in this pool. So it's important to keep a record of places that you've checked out. And if you think there is a possibility, even if for some reason you're not seeing a lot of activity in a pool for 1 year, remember it could be that we haven't had a lot of snow, so there wasn't enough snow melt to adequately fill it. We haven't had enough rain, there's been a drought going on. All of those can affect the hydrology of these pools. And so we really want to keep visiting places spring after spring. And one of the things I love so much about working with vernal pools is that I've really gotten to develop a sense of place with pools that I've been able to visit year after year, and getting to have this intimate connection with the land. This is a pool that I actually am going to need to walk into because where I'm seeing egg masses and things is a little bit further out. So again, I'm going to just kind of think of like walking like a heron, that we're going to just very carefully place our feet down and really look where we're going. So you can see in the net here, we have a whole bunch of little springtails, and then some of these little longer guys that move really quick are mosquito larvae. There are all sorts of insects that also lay their eggs and have their larvae in vernal pools. There are a lot of animals that find food in vernal pools. Owls, raccoons, bear, they'll come in. You also have a lot of predation happening between species inside of the pool. You have this whole food chain that exists encapsulated inside of a vernal pool, as well as animals that come in from the woods to visit these vernal pools and find food here. Because this pool is on the shallow side, that there's been a lot of predation because things were more at the surface and easy for animals to scoop up and eat. For a while was a great blue heron rookery that we'd visit, and just like going to all these different places in the woods and getting to have this appreciation of nature and getting to feel at home in the woods is such a gift.